Cross-cultural communications. Greece versus United States. Hi, I'm De'Aris Nelson, and I am presenting my PowerPoint slides on the culture of Greece verbal and nonverbal communications. The two symbols displayed represent the coat of arms and flag of Greece. Greece verbal communication. They are found to have a proud culture that's warm and hospitable. When performing their interpersonal relationship, they're warm-hearted and keep from communicating in business-oriented conversations. They're very apt to get to know a person during the first interaction, but avoid discussing personal relationships. When speaking in a group setting, they can be portrayed as arguing with each other because of their loud way of speaking, but that's just their compassionate way of expressing themselves. They keep themselves from using any facial expressions when speaking to one another so that no misunderstandings would occur. Greece communication interactors don't think it's rude to interrupt someone when they're speaking. They're quick to give responses before finding out exactly what a person is saying. The picture in the slide displays Greece social gathering in a small room with their seated close next to each other. Greece nonverbal communication. Notice two men gracefully touching without interfering on each other's personal space. With Greece having a compassionate culture, shaking a person's hand firmly, giving complete eye contact, and smiling are ways of expressing nonverbal communication. When they have reached the stage of developing a comfortable relationship with each other, they interact by greeting each other with a kiss on the cheek. Their personal space is never invaded. When building a relationship, they become very touchy and enjoy the comfort of sitting close to each other. The nonverbal communication interest is very open. Greece verbal and nonverbal gestures. The first picture displays Greece's way of commuting the word yes. Greece's word for yes is ne, and their way of expressing the word yes is by using a slow movement to one side while slightly closing their eyes and lowering their head. Notice in the second image that the couple is displaying Greece's way of waving. When waving goodbye, they make sure that their palm is not extended from their index finger. They find a serious nonverbal insult into Greece. Lastly, the third image displays a woman with her index finger in front of her lips. They have a common gesture of stating to a person, "I want to tell you something." This will probably be taken as someone to be quiet in another country.
Next, we'll be discussing the verbal and nonverbal communication in America. Verbal communication is when someone uses words and sounds to express themselves. Nonverbal communication is when a person uses mannerisms and gestures. Verbal communication in America. The U.S. is a low-context culture, so people rely more on verbal communication than nonverbal communication. The American language does a good job of incorporating words from diverse cultures and social communities. Different dialects and accents can be found across the country. There are language distinguishments between older and younger people. Direct communication is used to convey a message verbally. People are expected to get the point. Sometimes nuances such as understatement, sarcasm, and humor may be missed. Language styles. Americans are often enthusiastic when they talk, but emotion is showed through how we talk. Modesty. Americans are not very modest. People are expected to speak on their own behalf instead of waiting for someone to introduce them. Raised voices. Americans speak at higher volumes in public places. Small talk. Americans make small talk because they don't like silence, so Americans will often fill the gap with conversation. Nonverbal communication in America. Some gestures may have a lot of significance and some may not. A head toss can mean many things ranging from "hey, what's up" to "over there." A head toss is a directional cue in America. Nodding is used to say something affirmative, like yes or agreement. Waving is a form of saying hello or goodbye. A handshake is another form of greeting. Hand-up gesture stands for stop or settle down. Eye contact is significant when having a conversation with someone because it shows respect. Personal space is used for interactions among good friends or family. The personal stage consists of two phases. The close phase, which is 1.5 to 2.5 feet, and the far phase, which is 2.5 to 4 feet.
Now we will be discussing and explaining nonverbal and verbal communication practices in Greece. In a 2001 study done by psychologist Therese Joyner, 78 Greek managers were observed for nonverbal communicative behavior. She discovered that Greek employees valued low levels of decentralization and high levels of formalization. This means that large organizations move away from a single authority and more towards a shared responsibility. This type of authority model is aligned with the behavior of society. However, because of this high power distance, communication has to be clear and effective. That is why Greeks strongly avoid uncertainty in the workplace. Joyner's study concluded that Greek managers are less stressed than American managers and have better chances to have a successful company. In the Journal of Social Psychology, scientists Rinland, Jones, and Brinkman conducted a close analysis of Greek interpersonal communication. They discovered that Greeks were using direct body language, meaning they highly value body language in conversation. People tend to stand closer to each other when interacting. Touch is more commonly used to build relationships. They also discovered that males use less touch when interacting with each other, and females, in turn, use more touch. In a social theory and health journal written by social scientists Christodoulou and Kyproianos, the importance of education in Greece and in their education system is highly valued. Students are taught to communicate and be competent in their communication. In America, this would be considered like manners. In Greece, active listening is necessary for teacher and pupil relationships to develop. These are considered ritual rules, and all members of the community are expected to use these rules for successful communication.
Now we'll be talking about American verbal and nonverbal communication examples. America is the melting pot of the world. There are many cultures present, and that number continues to rise. With that being said, it can be difficult to label exactly what is considered to be normal, nonverbal, and verbal communication. For the purpose of this presentation, I will be describing what is considered to be a generic American citizen. When immersed in American culture, one may come to find that Americans are professional and moderately reserved in comparison to other cultures, seeing as Americans can be labeled as laid-back or high-strung, depending on the culture of origin of the observer. Such moderate reservations can be extended to the way Americans greet each other when first meeting, as there is a customary and usually generic greeting that is accompanied by a firm handshake. In comparison, when Americans are greeting a friend, the interaction can be much warmer and intimate, depending on the degree of the relationship between the two people. America is classified as a direct communication country, and according to the online article, American Communication Style, this means that when two people take part in a communication interaction, the primary goal is to trade or observe some form of information. This is especially true in the realm of business. Generally, American business meetings include a brisk, cordial greeting followed by an intermediate communication interaction. Personal life is rarely mentioned in professional settings. Communication interactions that involve intimate or personal relations can vary greatly from these interactions involving business. Americans tend to be much more expressive and open in communication towards those that they are familiar with, states the online state government article, So You're an American Now. Intimate relationships specifically involve an even more meaningful bond than that of interpersonal relationships. In nonverbal communication, it is considered to be the most honest of all communication, as our first reactions are usually physical and subconscious, according to online article Leonard Melindo. American culture, being a direct communication country, heavily relies on direct nonverbal communication. In American culture, when an individual is first meeting another, there will typically be a firm handshake followed by direct eye contact and body orientation toward the speaker. During business interactions, there is a set criteria as to what will occur between the two parties. Typically, both parties greet each other with a firm handshake, followed by the hosting party offering seating arrangements and then performing a display of power. Direct eye contact is maintained throughout the interaction, and both parties are oriented towards each other. When discussing the nonverbal communication that takes place in interpersonal and intimate relations, it is difficult to include them all. Of the various types of nonverbal communication, intimate nonverbal communication is the most complex, stated the authors of the online published article, Professors Joan and Guerrero. These complex actions include hugging, close personal space, and eye contact signals specific to each couple. In American culture, there are many gestures. To agree or say yes, a person would nod his head up or down in a vertical manner. To say no, a person would nod his head or her head side to side horizontally, sometimes closing the eyes as well. To be quiet nonverbally, a person would close their mouth and place their index finger perpendicular to their lips. And to say goodbye, in American culture, an individual will raise their hand with an open palm and shake it back and forth.
Next, we will be talking about the distinct differences between the United States and Greece in terms of verbal and nonverbal communication. So one of the distinct differences between US and Greece verbally is Americans are direct communicators, where Greeks are indirect to avoid any confrontation or indifferences. The Cultural Atlas for Americans' culture site includes information where Americans are very direct communicators. They tend to convey their entire message verbally, paying less attention to body language. People are expected to get to the point. Where the Cultural Atlas for Greeks' culture site includes information where Greeks can be quite indirect communicators, and to avoid conflict or confrontation, they often take a long-winded roundabout approach to conveying their messages sensitively and tactfully. Americans use sarcasm or subtle statements to relay negative information to another, such as bad news, where Greeks use a more passive-aggressive style, where to avoid any resentment or disappointment, they give indirect answers to avoid the word no. Another difference between US and Greece in terms of non-verbally would be touching. In terms of touching, Americans generally reserve their tactile behaviors for their personal relationships and not the general public. However, in Greece, moving away from a person standing too close to you can be viewed as unfriendly on your part, according to the Business Tripod for Greek Business. Eye contact between US and Greece. In America, any kind of eye contact can be seen as something that should be maintained directly, where in Greece, eye contact is used directly in conversation and not as casual or everyday expectations. So for an example, where you walk down the street in America, you give eye contact to someone and you are expected to be friendly, where in Greece, you give eye contact in conversation and not as a polite or a conversational matter. Continued differences between US and Greece, gestures versus facials. In terms of facial expressions, Greeks may smile when they are angry or upset to conceal their emotions, where many Americans smile when passing strangers on the street as a simple gesture of goodwill, according to the Cultural Atlas American Culture. Gestures such as okay, where you have your forefinger and thumb to make a circle, and or hold on, where your palm is in front of the face, is insulting in Greece. Where in America, it is used as signs to regulate conversation and confirm intentions such as nodding to report comprehension and conversation.
Lastly, we'll be talking about the similarities between US and Greece, the verbal and nonverbal, as well as the following conclusion. Greece is the oldest civilization in the world. When going over history, ancient Greece is the place to start. They have influenced many countries around the world, such as for governments, politics, culture, art, and society. Throughout this presentation, we've highlighted differences and similarities that our countries have. Around the world, there are key uses in the language of verbal and nonverbal communication. Some places are the same, and others are different. One example Kate worried about is body language. In Greece, moving away when you are talking to someone is rude, while here in the US, we tend to maintain a certain distance. We do share in the most notable nonverbal forms, handshaking. Both countries like to shake hands firmly while also maintaining eye contact. Comparing our verbal forms of communication is interesting as well. In the similarities, we both enjoy direct communication. We both don't mind raising our voices in order for the person to understand more clearly. And a major difference is that the Greeks don't mind being interrupted while talking, while here we actually find it rude. We're not so much different from Greece as some people believe, especially when it comes to our communication styles, education systems, architecture, and community. Greece has always been a great nation, and the influence it has had on the world is what the United States has tried to achieve since our formation.